Fate, at times, plays the cruelest games with people, elevating them to the pinnacle only to cast them into the abyss. Sir Walter Raleigh, the brilliant favorite of Queen Elizabeth, a poet, privateer, and explorer, knew this truth intimately. His name was once synonymous with daring discoveries and courtly renown. But a monarch's favor is fickle, and one day he found himself not in lavish chambers, but behind the bars of the Tower, condemned to death. 12 years of imprisonment, it seemed, should have broken even such an unyielding spirit. Yet when hope had all but faded, an ancient golden mirage flickered anew in his mind. The alluring legend of a lost city, El Dorado. It was his last, desperate gamble for freedom, for the return of his former glory, for redemption. But what was this myth that so powerfully captivated the minds of the greatest adventurers of that era? The legend of El Dorado was not merely a tale of a golden city, but a captivating image of a ruler whose body was covered in gold dust for sacred rituals, then washed off in a lake brimming with untold treasures. This mythical land, hidden deep within the new unheard of wealth, though more often bringing only disappointment and death. For Walter Raleigh, imprisoned in the Tower, this golden phantom transformed into something more than just a myth. It became his final desperate wager, a key to freedom, to the restoration of his former greatness, to the salvation of his honor. His mind, once occupied with court intrigues and poetry, was now completely consumed by this gold fever, the last ray of hope in the pitch-black darkness of his captivity. And he was ready to risk everything for this elusive goal. However, Raleigh was not merely a dreamer languishing in a stone cell, whose last hope was born within the suffocating walls of the Tower. His obsession with El Dorado was rooted in personal experience, in the very expedition of 1595 that led him into the wilds of Guiana. There, amidst the humid jungles and the whispers of indigenous legends, he did not find golden cities, but he gathered something else: impressions, snippets of stories, mineral samples, which in his hands transformed into a convincing narrative. His work, the discovery of the large, rich, and beautiful empire of Guiana, was not merely a travelogue, but a meticulously constructed account designed to ignite imagination and persuade the crown of the reality of untold riches. He described not only potential treasures, but also strategic advantages, promising Britain unimaginable power and superiority over Spain. It was these writings, these passionate assurances, that became the cornerstone upon which he attempted to build his final, desperate plan for liberation. Royal mercy is an unpredictable substance, especially when it concerns long-term prisoners of the Tower. Yet, against logic and common sense, James I, weary of perpetual financial difficulties, and swayed by the charms of Raleigh's rhetoric, made a decision. Raleigh's letters, filled not just with pleas but with audacious promises, played their part. He did not beg for freedom, he offered its price: El Dorado. Convincing the monarch of the reality of Guyana's golden mountains, Raleigh painted pictures of boundless wealth, capable of not only replenishing the depleted treasury, but also of forever undermining Spanish power in the New World. This was not just an expedition plan. It was a masterpiece of desperation, wrapped in the guise of imperial ambitions and personal vengeance. He swore he would bring back enough gold to atone for all his sins, and more importantly for the king, to finance his court. The promise was so grand, so tempting, that even skepticism gave way to hope. The doors of the Tower, which had seemed eternal, were about to swing open, leading not just to freedom, but to a new, final act of a great drama. After 12 long years spent in stone confinement, the Tower finally released Sir Walter Raleigh. He emerged not as a free man, but as a figure in a desperate royal game, where his last breath was at stake. Exhausted but not broken, his mind remained obsessed with the golden mirage of El Dorado, the very legend that had become his sole currency for buying freedom. Every step on London's cobblestones, every breath of air, seemed to carry the taste of fragile, conditional hope. He was a man returned from oblivion, yet bound by an ancient tale, by an oath sworn to a king who saw only the gleam of untold riches in distant lands. The weight of these expectations, the whisper of impending glory or inevitable doom, already pressed upon his shoulders, long before the first sail was hoisted. And so, after years of imprisonment, steeped in gold fever and alluring mirages, Sir Walter Raleigh received his final chance. Not just freedom, but the opportunity to reclaim his former glory, to pull himself from the clutches of oblivion. He staked everything, and King James, though cautiously, gave his assent. In March 1617, a flotilla of 14 ships set sail from Plymouth, not merely vessels, but the embodiment of desperate hope. On board gathered a motley crowd, veterans of previous campaigns, greedy adventurers, young gentlemen yearning for glory, and even those simply seeking escape from debt. Over 500 souls, bound for the shores of Guiana, where, Raleigh assured them, the immeasurable riches of El Dorado awaited. Unbelievable expectations rested upon him, to replenish the depleted treasury, to undermine Spanish influence, and most importantly, to prove his usefulness to the crown. This was not merely a quest for gold. It was a crusade for his own destiny, the final act in the drama of a man who had played with fire for too long. The irony of fate, perhaps, was already scoffing at them, anticipating the trials ahead. The flotilla that left Plymouth seemed to carry not only Raleigh's hopes, but also the weight of ancient curses. The Atlantic met them not with a benevolent breeze, but with a fury worthy of the gods. Storms, like enraged furies, lashed the ships, tearing sails, tossing vessels, threatening to swallow them in the bottomless abyss. But even when the sky calmed, the ocean did not release its grip. Treacherous currents, invisible yet powerful, relentlessly swept the fleet off course, turning every mile of progress into a desperate struggle. And when the exhausted sailors finally reached the coast of Guiana, a new ordeal awaited them, the mouth of the Orinoco. The great river, which promised a path to El Dorado, proved to be an impregnable fortress. Shoals, whirlpools, unpredictable currents. Every attempt to enter its murky embrace turned into fruitless persistence. Time was running out, strength was waning, and the golden cities remained but a phantom on the horizon, obscured by a wall of water. The Orinoco River, once a golden gateway, turned into a merciless labyrinth. Days stretched into weeks, and the mirages of El Dorado melted under the scorching sun, carrying away the last vestiges of hope. Instead of mythical cities and untold treasures, the expedition found only fever, despair, and the specters of empty promises. A heavy, unbearable truth, like a lead weight, settled upon the hearts of both Sir Walter and his weary, exhausted men. The main mission had failed. The gold, so necessary to justify their audacious venture, was not there. At least not here, not as easily as they had dreamed. And so, standing on the deck, under the gentle sway of the ship, the man whose name once shone at court was forced to give the bitterest order. Retreat. The dream for which he had risked everything had turned to dust. But how could he return empty-handed? How could he admit complete defeat without attempting to find some compensation for the high price of his freedom? The dream of Manoa, once so vivid, dissolved in the suffocating air of the Orinoco, leaving Sir Walter with only the echo of unfulfilled promises and the chilling certainty of impending doom. 12 years in the Tower seemed but a prelude to a far more bitter end if he failed to find a way out of this abyss. Deep despair gripped him when it became clear. There were no gold veins here capable of restoring the king's favor and postponing his execution. He faced a choice: accept his fate or defy it one last time. And Raleigh, a man of adventure, could not simply give up. He knew that in these waters, if not in the ground, lay another kind of gold, that which had already been mined and was now sailing on Spanish galleons. This path was no less dangerous, but it promised immediate compensation for all losses, if luck smiled upon him. And luck, as is known, is a capricious lady. El Dorado had not opened its arms. The dream of golden cities had turned to dust, and Sir Walter, faced with the humiliation of returning with nothing, made the only decision he believed could save him from disgrace and another noose. His fleet, initially equipped to search for mythical treasures, now turned its cannons against very real Spanish galleons. These were not merely attacks of desperation, but an attempt to replenish the empty treasury, justify the colossal expenses, and perhaps reclaim some of his former glory. Ships laden with tobacco, sugar, valuable spices, anything that could yield some profit, were captured. These spoils, though not the gold of El Dorado, still represented a substantial prize, capable of at least partially satisfying the crown's expectations. Returning with such gifts, even if acquired not quite by the rules, seemed the only way out. But what are rules in a world where the line between hero and criminal is so thin? Sir Walter, once a poet and courtier, now once again donned the mask of a privateer, or, as the Spanish would say, a pirate. The boundary between these concepts in that era was fluid, determined more by the flag under which one plundered than by morality. For England, whose treasury had long been accustomed to such receipts, it was merely a continuation of a long-standing maritime tradition, sanctioned plunder in the name of the crown. But for Madrid, whose world was built on the flow of gold from the New World, Raleigh was nothing more than a desperate cutthroat who had encroached upon their rightful possessions. His actions, dictated by despair and a desire to somehow justify the failure of El Dorado, only confirmed his image as a ruthless corsair. He returned to what he knew, to what had once brought him honor, but now threatened even greater trouble. The spoils, though not gold, still fostered hope for salvation. However, as often happens, one problem is solved, while another, far more dangerous, begins to loom on the horizon. The irony of fate. Having failed to find the mythical El Dorado, Raleigh nevertheless managed to send ships home loaded with spoils from Spanish vessels. The treasury, of course, did not refuse such a gift, even if obtained by dubious means. Copper, tobacco, spices, these were not the gold of the Incas, but still a tangible contribution. However, every chest hoisted aboard an English ship unwittingly became a harbinger of the approaching storm. Behind the glitter of these unplanned riches already loomed the shadow of an inevitable diplomatic crisis, capable of engulfing not only Raleigh, but also shaking the fragile peace between nations. The price to be paid for these trophies was far higher than their market value. The royal treasury, so long in need, received its modest replenishment. Not with the mythical gold of Manoa, but with quite tangible spoils of desperate piracy: tobacco, sugar, spices. A bitter irony, it must have been, for the monarch who staked a legend and ultimately reaped a harvest of diplomatic trouble. James I, always pragmatic, surely weighed the negligible gains against the colossal cost. He craved a golden solution for his kingdom's debts, a quiet undermining of Spanish power. But Raleigh, in his mad scramble for survival, delivered a resounding declaration of war. The fragile peace, so carefully nurtured by the Stuart, now hung by the thinnest thread. Whispers from Madrid would soon turn into a furious roar, demanding retribution for this audacious encroachment. What was the price of this hard-won freedom, this meager treasure, when the shadow of a much larger conflict already loomed? News of Raleigh's audacious raid on Spanish possessions, though it did not bring the gold of El Dorado, resounded like thunder in Madrid. Philip III, who had long watched the English adventurer with suspicion, took it as a personal insult and a direct violation of the fragile peace so painstakingly achieved. Spanish diplomats, losing no time, unleashed a torrent of angry protests upon James I's court. The demands were uncompromising. Either Raleigh would be immediately executed for piracy and violation of sovereignty, or England risked plunging back into the bloody abyss of war. Well, fate, at times, throws such gifts that even the devil would envy their sophistication. Sir Walter, who sought freedom and wealth, seemed to have found only cause for a new, far more serious accusation. Now, with his life once again hanging by a thread, he had to face not only the monarch's wrath, but also the intricate machinations of those who were once considered friends. His return to England proved not a salvation, but a trap. Raleigh's fate seemed predetermined even before he set foot on his native soil. A cascade of accusations was leveled against him, not only for breaking the peace with Spain, but also for old conspiracies, for treason against the crown. Every step, every word was tailored to a pre-written script. The trial turned into a show trial farce, where evidence was secondary and the verdict inevitable. Those who only yesterday sought his favor, who benefited from his patronage, now hastily turned away, fearing to tarnish their reputation by association with the disgraced adventurer. The betrayal of friends, always painful, in his case became the final stroke to the portrait of a man whose luck had completely run out. In this tangle of intrigues and political pressure, with Spain demanding blood and the court craving stability, Raleigh became a bargaining chip. But was this the only reason for the final verdict? Thus concluded this show trial farce, but the true price of peace had not yet been paid. King James, though not without benefit to himself, found himself between two fires, the wrath of Spain, threatening war, and the necessity of preserving the fragile truce, along with the few spoils Raleigh had managed to bring back. The choice was obvious for the pragmatic monarch, but tragic for the man whose life was the embodiment of adventure. The sentence, passed many years ago, suddenly acquired its final, fatal meaning. Not for conspiracy, not for piracy, but for political calculation, Raleigh was to pay the ultimate price. His fate became a bargaining chip in the great game of nations, where the life of one man, even such an extraordinary one, mattered little in the face of state interests. In this cruel, yet at times the only possible decision, lay not only the cynical logic of power, but also a certain inevitability that had hovered over the hero since his first step into the New World. And so, after so many years of wandering the seas and corridors of power, the sentence that had hung over Sir Walter Raleigh like a sword of Damocles finally fell. Not for piracy, nor for treason in the direct sense, but for inconvenient truth and political calculation. But in his eyes there was neither panic nor plea. 12 years spent within the gloomy walls of the tower seemed not to have broken, but to have tempered his spirit, transforming the fierce adventurer into a philosopher ready to accept any fate. He met the news of the inevitable with that calm strength peculiar only to those who have already lost something irreplaceable, and to whom earthly misfortunes seem but a pale shadow of true pain. It seemed he had long ago let go of the world, and the world at last let go of him. The expedition for El Dorado, which turned into a failure in the search for gold, dealt Raleigh a blow far more devastating than any royal disfavor. It was there, amidst the fruitless search for mythical riches, that he lost his son, young Wat. This unspeakable grief, perhaps even more than the long years of imprisonment in the Tower, truly forged the new Raleigh. The man who once chased glory and gold with such fierce ambition now seemed to gaze upon the world and his impending end with a deep, almost serene detachment. Having endured the greatest personal loss, the whims of kings and court intrigues seemed mere trifles to him. He had already paid a price far greater than his own life, and therefore approached the scaffold not as a desperate man, but as one who had reconciled with his destiny, finding a kind of freedom in its inevitability. What then could the king offer as a final mercy to a man who had already lost everything truly valuable? James I, seeking to maintain decorum, and perhaps wishing to avoid an overly bloody spectacle, revealed his royal mercy to the world. Instead of the agonizing quartering prescribed for high treason, Raleigh was granted a relatively quick death, beheading. What an irony of fate! 12 years in captivity, endless intrigues, a failed odyssey for gold, and in the end, only a change in the method of departure. Sir Walter, always distinguished by his sharp mind, met this news with his characteristic biting humor. He seemed even grateful for such a gift, for to a man who had known the bitterness of losing his son and the collapse of all hopes, death seemed merely the final act of a drama. His composure in the face of the inevitable was almost defiant, as if he already anticipated his last appearance on stage, where he was to play the lead role in his own final performance. At dawn on October 29, 1618, the former queen's favorite, poet, and adventurer ascended the scaffold near Westminster Palace. 12 years in the Tower and the bitter failure of El Dorado, which took his son, had made him indifferent to his earthly end. When the executioner, as tradition dictated, asked for forgiveness, Raleigh, with his characteristic caustic smirk, replied, "No need to ask forgiveness. Let the axe be sharp. It is a short cure." In this last phrase, thrown in the face of death, there was neither fear nor despair, only a sharp, almost philosophical acceptance of the inevitable. He transformed his execution into a final act of irony, a demonstration that even on the brink of the abyss, one can maintain dignity and wit. This was not just the end of a life, but the culmination of an entire era, where a man, having passed through the crucible of ambition and loss, grasped the true price of existence. His words, like an echo, spread through the crowd, leaving behind not sorrow, but wonder. When the executioner's axe fell, severing the thread of Sir Walter Raleigh's life, the crowd gathered at Westminster Palace stood still. The air, it seemed, was filled not only with a dying gasp but also with a silent question. What was this? The death of an adventurer, or the martyrdom of a hero? In that moment, as blood stained the block, Raleigh definitively passed from the world of living intrigues into the pantheon of legends. his last, cold-blooded jest in the face of death. "Let the axe be sharp. It is a short cure," instantly spread throughout London, becoming an epitaph to his fearless nature. The people, who only yesterday saw him merely as a disgraced favorite, now mourned the victim of a political game, a man whose fate had become a hostage to the crown and imperial ambitions. The image of Raleigh the martyr, who gave his life for ideals, or perhaps for his own pride, began to form then, on the scaffold. And in this denouement, there was something more than just the end of a life. When the executioner's axe ended Sir Walter's earthly journey, his body found rest in St. Margaret's Church, but not completely. His head, severed from his body, became the last, most personal artifact of this odyssey, a keeper of unspoken thoughts and unfulfilled dreams. Lady Elizabeth, his faithful wife, could not part with this sorrowful relic. She kept the embalmed head in a velvet bag, wherever she lived, for almost 3 decades, until her own death. This was not merely a symbol of grief, but a silent testament to her boundless devotion and a mute reproach to the injustice of the world. This eerie gesture captured all the pain and absurdity of human destiny, as well as the unquenchable memory of a man whose life was far greater than just a series of adventures and downfalls. But Walter Raleigh was far more than just a victim of political games. He became the embodiment of an era, a poet whose lines resonated in royal chambers, a scholar whose maps and observations expanded horizons, a politician whose ambitions shaped imperial strategy. It was he, through his expeditions, and, no less importantly, through his famous work on Guiana, who not only laid the foundation for English colonial claims in the New World, but also created the archetype of the English adventurer, fearless, greedy for knowledge and wealth, capable of great achievements and profound mistakes. His Wheel, a chronicle of daring discoveries, literary feats, and political intrigues, where every failure only emphasized the scale of his personality. The irony of fate is that his own tragedy only strengthened the myth he so desperately pursued, inspiring others to search for the Golden City. The irony of fate, worthy of Raleigh's own pen, lies in the paradoxical fact that his tragic odyssey, seemingly ending in complete collapse and execution, did not bury but rather strengthen the myth of El Dorado. On the contrary, his failure, his books full of vivid descriptions and promises, became a kind of beacon for subsequent generations of adventurers. Raleigh's death only added a martyr's aura to the legend, making it even more appealing. The Spanish continued to search for the Golden Man. The English did not abandon hope, and even centuries later, when maps became more accurate and jungles less mysterious, the image of a golden city, lost in the depths of the Orinoco, continued to stir minds. Thus, the last days of the great adventurer, his desperate attempt to gain freedom through gold, paradoxically, did not dispel the mirage but wove it into the very fabric of Western culture. And in this, perhaps, lies the bitterest joke of his fate. He did not find gold, but he gave the world a dream that outlived him. Mysterious and contradictory, he left behind far more than just undiscovered treasures. The annals of history abound with figures who stride across the stage of time, leaving a legacy as intricate as it is grand. But few embody the very essence of paradox as Sir Walter Raleigh. Was he a dazzling favorite of the Queen, a courageous explorer whose spirit yearned for mythical golden cities beyond the horizon? Or merely a cunning opportunist, a pirate in disguise, whose ambition ultimately led to his demise? He was a poet, a philosopher, a scholar, and a ruthless adventurer, a man of such kaleidoscopic talents that his very existence seemed to defy singular definition. His life, a turbulent saga of ascents and crushing falls, reads like an epic poem penned by fate itself. It is a narrative not only of ambition and discovery, but also of an enduring spirit. Tested by fortune's cruelest whims, forever navigating the treacherous currents between glory and ruin. Sir Walter Raleigh's life is not merely a biography, but a kaleidoscope of incredible highs and crushing lows, where every turn of fate seemed like a mockery or a gift from the gods. From the brilliant favorite of the Queen, surrounded by glory and wealth, to a prisoner of the Tower, condemned to death, his path was paved with both the gold of El Dorado and bitter tears. The irony of fate was that even after 12 years of imprisonment, when all seemed lost, he found hope anew, only to lose it even more tragically. Raleigh was a man who did not break, even when the world around him crumbled. He met every adversity with astonishing dignity, be it the death of his son or his own sentence. His steadfastness in the face of the inevitable was striking, as if he understood that some forces transcended human will. He was not just a plaything of fortune, but also a symbol of how great. Minds can be ground by the millstones of history. And so, the man who could have been a hero became a victim. His life, full of brilliance and risk, turned out to be merely a pawn on the chessboard of grand politics. King James, who needed gold, but even more, peace with Spain, ruthlessly sacrificed Raleigh. This was not justice, but cold calculation, a demonstration of power, and a willingness to appease a powerful neighbor. Raleigh's fate is a vivid reminder of how state interests, those soulless millstones, grind down even the most outstanding individuals, turning their achievements to dust and their ambitions into tragic irony. He brought the crown gold, but received the block in return. However, there is something that even the block could not extinguish, and so, when the executioner's axe fell, it seemed that not only the adventurer's life, but also the very dream of El Dorado was cut short. But history, as is known, loves paradoxes. Raleigh's death, this cruel sacrifice to a political game, paradoxically did not kill, but elevated the legend of the Golden City to new heights. His tragic odyssey, his insatiable thirst for the unknown and for riches, became not just a personal drama, but a symbol of humanity's eternal striving for the horizon, for what lies beyond the known. For is it not this unrestrained urge for adventure, for knowledge, for myth, that drives us through the ages? Is it not in this the immortality of the spirit, which does not fade even under the shadow of the scaffold? Perhaps the true El Dorado is not gold, but the search itself. The quest continues, for some legends simply refuse to die. Gold. The very idea of it, like an unquenchable thirst, has driven people to the ends of the earth for centuries. The legend of the Gilded Man, of a city where streets were paved with precious stones, originated even before the arrival of the conquistadors, whispered in the jungles and mountains of the New World. Sir Walter Raleigh, a Renaissance man and a victim of political intrigue, was just one of many who succumbed to its allure, paying the ultimate price for his obsession. Yet paradoxically, his tragic end did not dispel the myth. It only breathed new life into it. Through the centuries, this elusive dream continues to beckon, becoming not just a historical account, but an eternal source of inspiration, reinterpreted time and again in new forms. Even now, centuries later, Sir Walter Raleigh's tragic odyssey and the elusive gleam of El Dorado have not faded. Instead, they shine brighter in humanity's collective memory. This tale of grandeur and downfall, of fervent hope and bitter disappointment, has become an inexhaustible wellspring for writers, filmmakers, and artists. The myth of the Golden City itself, amplified by Raleigh's real yet equally fantastic attempt to find it, continues to draw adventurers and creators, offering them the timeless theme of the thirst for discovery and the perils of obsession. From the pages of adventure novels to epic motion pictures, the story of Raleigh and his golden dream lives on, a reminder of the fragility of human ambition and the inexorability of fate. In this eternal yearning for the unknown, in the pursuit of distant horizons, lies something that connects us to bygone eras and inspires new endeavors, sometimes as perilous as sailing for phantom gold. For the drive towards the undiscovered, the unattainable, be it the gold of a mythical land or the light of distant stars, is humanity's perpetual engine. Brave navigators who defied oceans in search of new lands foreshadowed future generations. Their thirst for discovery, sometimes bordering on recklessness, resonates remarkably with modern space odysseys and deep-sea explorations. Sir Walter Raleigh, with all his mistakes and tragedies, was but one of countless links in this endless chain of seekers. His desperate chase for El Dorado, which ended in dust and the gallows, reflects the same insatiable curiosity that drives scientists exploring the mysteries of the atom or the genetic code. This is not merely a